So, what in the world is Gatekey? Some time ago, I had wondered, what if there is a world where names were both titles and identifiers? And then afterwards, I had sketched up an image of this silly little blonde witch with fun glasses and a twirly dress, and once I did, I'm not ashamed to admit that I had just absolutely fallen in love with the concept of this world that I had made in a span of like 30 minutes. After one thing led to another, 2 years later, I'm finally in a place to say that I would like to put my concepts out there for everyone to peruse. But first, let me get to the basics of what you need to know. In the world of Fallen Talam, there exist 3 different thinking creatures: the humans, the witches, and the monstrous. Each embodies a different aspect of the elements that make up living beings. The monstrous as mind, the humans as body, and the witches as soul. These 3 peoples live on the continent we call Fallen Talam. Where our story takes place is with the witches. Witches, as said before, are made up primarily of soul. With strength of the soul, witches are able to manifest or manipulate elements of the world, or what everyone would commonly refer to as magic. Magic to the witches is as important as air, since without it they would be left defenseless. Magic in this world is tied directly to your identity. Since it comes from your soul, your very being is what defines what your magic could and can be, and witches take that extremely seriously, so much so that their naming system is completely oriented around your talents and skills. For example, our leading lady, the Gatekey witch, also known as just Key's magic, is being able to open doors to anywhere she can vision, be it her own room, the dining hall of her coven, or even just 5 feet away from her. But nearby places are not the only thing she's able to access, as with her power, she also has the acute sense of being able to locate worlds filled with any type of energy that she desires. And while that sounds powerful, think of the doors like Cyclops' eyes. If you know, you know, but she can open the doors, but depending on the size of the door and the velocity how fast the energy is already traveling, that will dictate how the magic is directed. Say she wants a fireball, but she needs to find a place where there's already a fireball traveling in the size and speed that she wants, and trying to find doors to these places is already tough, so Key will often reach for more simple spaces that are made purely up of water to create one giant flood, or places between the worlds where raw magic is already directly flowing, so she can manipulate that energy into a blast that she can direct herself. Magic like Key's is considered exceptionally strong, but what makes it strong is how she can envision and think of it. If you put your creativity to practice and keep your mind open, your soul reflects what you see yourself and what you can do. Not everyone, though, can be so gifted, as Key's close friend, the Lockheart witch, did not seem to pull from the best cards herself. Her power is, well, it's no power. She's basically a walking dead zone of magic. The moment anything with a strong soul comes near her, that power is immediately dissolved, and unfortunately, this is an ability that seems to be constantly on. It was believed the moment that she was born that there was no way she had any magic whatsoever, which was only partly true. Locke did have power, but that power just had the side effect of shutting off her own ability to control even the smallest parts of magic. If not directed towards somewhere else, Locke's magic would eat away at her own. Many avoided Locke because of this odd trait of her power, but not Key. Because of Key's magic coming from other places, Locke's abilities didn't really have too much effect on Key's own. One side note that I do want to admit to you all here is that even though that I've always had Key and Locke be friends in mind, I haven't really ever thought about how they'd met. I am toying with the idea that they just grew up together, and alternatively, the idea that they just became friends right before the story starts. I'm leaning towards that they have been friends since they were babies, but look forward to that changing in the future. I tend to ascribe myself to these characters, and I do imagine that in the future this might change and this might stay as is. We don't know yet. But for now, let's talk about my other favorite guy. The Harvest Moon Witch, also known as just Harvey. Harvey's magic is a bit more abstract in comparison to Locke and Key's. He is able to increase the passage of time on individual objects. The objects are usually plants or other organic material. One could suggest that Harvey is able to increase the time on living beings, but the real limitation is that he can't manipulate things with a high soul content. One of my least favorite tropes in media is when an ability is able to be used on everything except for quote-unquote living things. And when it comes to living things, it's such a wishy-washy kind of categorical system. I mean, I understand what they're trying to say. It's that the magic can be used on anything that's not a person or an animal. But then it's used on like plant life, and I think that's kind of weird. I made Harvey's magic the way it is in order to combat this, and I think one of the best ways of combating that kind of limitation is just saying that you can't use it on organic material. And even then, I think that's a bit silly, but the whole soul content thing was just my way of trying to avoid that kind of limitation. To give a more specific image of how his magic works, Harvey will often use his power to control plant life, turning small vines into large tendrils that can snatch and ensnare enemies, or just as his name suggests, creating a large, bountiful harvest of fruit and veggies. Which, if Harvey was a bit more motivated, I'm sure he would put his brain power to this, but alas, the witchling does spend most of his days just kind of lounging and fucking around. That is usually until he feels the need to screw with Key or put Locke in her place. Harvey never really felt he had a reason to put effort towards anything. There was no consequences in his life in not doing anything, so why should he care? Had it not been for the overzealous Key and overly serious Locke, Harvey may as well have spent the rest of his life in becoming a slug of a witch, but these three wouldn't really be anywhere without each other, and I think that's a very important element to these characters. Witch society is very, very close-knit compared to the monstrous or humans. Most all witches are accounted for through the coven system that was made by their ancestors in order to combat humans who would hunt them down and monstrous who would overwhelm them and drive them out of their territories. In the coven system, there are 13 households. All of the former come from Coven 3, but in this, there's no greater honor than being able to say that you hail from the all-powerful and all-knowing Coven 1, also known as White Tower. White Tower is unique in the aspect that they are home to the leaders and council of witch society, the judge, the jurors, and the executioner. Most witches dream to be at these levels of power, to have control and the ability to alter so much of witch society. There are very, very few who are chosen to take on these roles, and one of those few is the huntsman witch, apprenticed to the executioner. Hunter is cold and calculating. Their steely gaze is often unnerving to those who first come across them, and that's not for no reason. Hunter grew up very differently in comparison to most witches and witchlings, as they grew up outside of the covens, being abandoned from their original coven and neglected to the ice and snow. But from the frost came a powerful being, one who embodied all of the harshness of winter. When the judge had come across this lost child, he had decided to take them in, rescue them from their poor fate in the snow, and bestow the honor of making them a witchling of White Tower, and giving them a name to represent the strength it took to withstand the frozen north. And yes, this is true. Many, though, would be quick to gloss over the fact that Hunter was absolutely terrified the first time they had made contact with anyone not resembling the creatures that had raised them. It took them years to learn how to speak, and even now, Hunter doesn't really talk much at all, due to the fact that they still don't quite understand how to convey their thoughts properly, or at least what the White Tower witches would consider proper. The judge, though, seemingly impressed by Hunter's ability to return to proper society so quickly, awarded them the status of becoming the executioner's apprentice. Witchlings Hunter's age were astounded at this. How could this nobody from the wilderness become so great? Perhaps they could one day too. But for Hunter, this didn't really feel like much of a change, just another order to follow and listen. They were honored for this achievement, but why? Perhaps it wasn't important. What was important, though, was their silence and their obedience, and Hunter would follow, unquestioningly. I've talked quite a bit about what's within witch society, but I'd also like to go over what is beyond it too. I mentioned briefly before that there was a period in time when witches were hunted by humans, and while that does continue to today, magic to humans is still a fairly foreign concept in this world. Due to the makeup of their bodies, humans cannot naturally manipulate magic, but with the help of outside sources, they are able to generate something similar to what witches can do, albeit on a much smaller scale. Many people still fear what magic is capable of doing, be it massive destruction towards the landscape or even mysterious, untraceable illnesses that could wipe out thousands. To most humans, that's just too great of a risk. Well, okay, not all humans. Of the population, few and far between have taken it upon themselves to study the capacities of what magic can and can't do. These scholars and researchers are known as wizards. Wizards dedicate themselves to learning how to harness magic's power through alternate methods. One recently discovered method is called artificial magic. This method allows the user to access power from sources that are rich in soul. With these sources, they are able to use magic in the same way witches can. Though not quite to the same scale, the process is still mostly the same. These humans have strengthened their souls in order to learn to control magic. They dedicate themselves entirely to this practice, not just by studying, but also taking on a new identity that honors the culture of scholarly effort, as well as their roots of where they came from. This combines their dedication and history as being a part of them, ingrained in their soul even, and there's no greater example of this than the grimoire of Rosebone Valley. Grimm grew up in a town that was hidden away from much of the world. Her people, in fact, settled in that area because it was so sheltered, and Grimm's family was one of those founding members, who now still remain in power because of their resolve to protect everyone. Because of this xenophobic view towards the outside world, Rosebone Valley grew more and more of a hatred towards anything they did not understand, and that hatred absolutely extended to magic. But one day, a plague had struck the town and left many dead in its wake. Grimm's own mother, Avelino, had been taken by this illness and was at death's door. Grimm and her family sought every possible cure, every method that was known to the valley, but none were successful. That was until a traveler came to the town who claimed that they could save Avelino's life. And blinded by desperation, Lonan forgot everything his town's culture was built on and allowed her to go through with the cure. Through magic, Avelino's life was restored, and she was cured of her ailment, but when she found out what had happened, Grimm's mother was so disgusted by the use of magic on her that she was found dead by her own hands the next morning. Grimm's father, Lonan, devastated by her death and what he found to be his own fault, had followed suit, believing his life as payment for hers. While the tragedy of the heads of the Azars was awful, losing both of her parents in less than a week, Grimm could only stare and think of nothing but anger. Her mother had been cured and the wizard did exactly what she said she could do, and all they could think of in return was, how dare she? She saved her mother's life and she would just toss it away. Magic was full of such possibilities that Grimm had to show the world what it could really do. With a newfound ambition, Grimm had vowed to show all of humankind that magic was a tool to be used for the betterment of society, not just something to be feared. Day after day, Grimm spent her time studying the art of magic and apprenticing under wizards in order to learn how to best utilize magic in all of its capacities. Not all of this would be sunshine and rainbows though, as from the shadows most would scoff and rebuke the young girl's assumed madness. But all of that would only strengthen Grimm's resolve to never give up on her dream for a brighter future, one perhaps beyond the valley. Now, I've laid out the characters who will be our little protagonists through this journey, but I feel like I need to tell you guys what else is out there, especially since I do want to make this a very expansive world. The sprites are monsters that devour living beings in order to consume the energy that their soul produces. They live off of that energy, and without it, they eventually die or weaken. Sentient creatures have extremely high contents of soul, and because of that, sprites typically seek out humans, monsters, or witches to consume. In order to combat and protect others from these beings, White Tower made the decision to protect all of Talam from these beasts. The sprites each take on 4 different forms that are categorized as liquid, solid, gas, and plasma, each with their own strengths and weaknesses, but all a horrible force to encounter. Solid sprites are massive, muscular figures that chase their prey down and either crush them with their massive talons or eat them whole with jaws that can widen much like a snake's. Liquid sprites are much smaller but fly in usually larger packs. Their bodies are made out of this black, thick, oil-like substance with talons made from the same material that their shells are. They will usually hunt their targets down by swooping down and drowning them in their slick bodies, and consuming them that way as well. In contrast to these largely imposing creatures, gas sprites are much more unnerving than intimidating. Their bodies closely resemble deer, with their bone-like faces having curling horns to look like antlers, and an elegant plume of a mane. Many find themselves too captivated to turn away from these otherworldly beasts, and by the time they do break from the mystical trance they found themselves in, it's already too late. The alluring fumes from the sprite's mask have already trapped you in a sluggish and weakened state that allows them to devour you. Lastly, we have the plasma sprites. These guys are unique in the trait that they have an extremely short lifespan. Unlike the others, which can sustain themselves for quite some time without the need to consume, plasma sprites require constant feeding on souls, otherwise they'll dissolve and die. This makes them extremely deadly. Their desperation to stay alive makes them fight in ways often dangerous to themselves, and with their loud, static-like screams and bright iridescent bodies, one could compare them to demons and angel bodies. The sprites have become a true pest in this world, and due to their very presence, many a civilization have fallen because of the death toll they invoke. Year after year, more sprites seem to appear, and in order to combat this, White Tower tasked witches across their society to be hunters of these monsters, protecting villages, cities, and kingdoms across the land to prevent the imbalance that would be put in place by the sprites. Long ago, witch society spent many years in turmoil against humans, as thousands of years ago, humans would hunt down and take apart witches in order to sell their body parts, organs, and other pieces of them to create magic-imbued objects. After such a long history of bloodshed, it surprises many to see witches so set on protecting the people who would kill them for a living. But thanks to the goodwill and benevolence of White Tower, witches look past the past, and instead look to be the bigger person, I suppose. Witch society itself wouldn't be anywhere near its organization if it wasn't for the efforts made by the great leaders of the coven system, the judge, the jurors, and the executioner. If it wasn't for them, their nation wouldn't be anywhere near where it is now, and even more likely it's possible witches wouldn't have even existed either. As the legend goes, the judge was just some witchling who had grown tired of all the fighting and fear and decided to unite the witches under one name and create a safe haven and unity. Together, alongside his friends and family, he made what we refer to today as the coven system, where 13 covens work together to protect and look out for each other so that the era of fear can never truly be a threat to them again. Once more leading them are the judge, jurors, and executioner. The judge is the overseer and director. He'll usually be the one making the big decisions in terms of direction. It is his responsibility to plan ahead and provide solutions for the covens when trouble arises. The jurors, in turn, are able to veto any decision that the judge makes. There are 7 jurors. Each one is picked based on recommendation and if the judge deems them worthy of the position. The jurors are the pillars of the coven system. They are the advisors of the judge and coordinators for events, trade, and commerce, speakers for their kind, and above all else, models of great and powerful witches for those to seek a higher purpose. To the sweet, small witchling, the jurors are idols they can one day dream to be like and strive to match. To those who lack purpose and desire change, to be a juror is an honor that can't be matched by any other position in witch society. Following last but not least is the executioner. And even though the name is intimidating, the role itself isn't all that scary. The executioner is closer to an auditor on most of their missions, taking stock of the supply that each coven has, then reporting back to White Tower, so that they are aware of what must be taken or given to where. That isn't to say that the executioner is named that way for no reason, though. In nations like the Witch Society, there are always threats and criminals that run about, and when that happens, it is up to the executioner and their headsmen to put them away, be it in their prison called Hysteria, or somewhere else to be dealt with by the judge and jurors personally. Alright, I know that it's been a lot so far, but my last little summary to you all is that I wanted to give a more thorough explanation of how magic works. Even though I went through it at the very beginning, in this universe it's a bit more abstract than most, but I will do my best to convey my funky little sparkles to you all. In Gatekey, sentient beings are made from 3 components, that being mind, body, and soul. With the mind, it embodies thought and logic. It's what gives you the ability to analyze and comprehend. The body is what tethers you to this world and strengthens you physically as well as keeps you alive. Without the body, you're basically the essence of a person without the means to interact with the world around you. The soul is all about emotion and feeling. While the mind you think, the body you react, the soul is all about feeling. And your soul is also where magic can be generated. And magic in this world comes from raw belief, perception, and identity. If you had pure energy, there isn't really anything you can do with that if you don't know what it is. But if you can envision turning that raw power into a flame, that is when it becomes more than energy. One couldn't do that with pure mind because you need to believe from your very essence that that can be done by you. And yeah, while you alone can be a strong force, what can make you stronger is the ability to make others believe in you. In this universe, you're able to make the perception of others influence your magic. You can gain abilities and lose them based purely off of the faith one might have in you because they project a certain form onto the way your soul makes magic. That's why to witches and wizards, it's important to take on a name that makes you who you are, because that's another way magic can be strengthened. It's pretty different and weird to describe, but I think it's really fun and opens a lot of interesting routes in this world. I'm probably going to make a video using examples of how this works in the near future, but for now, I'll leave you all with that. Alright, and now with all of that out of the way, I present to you Gatekey. Thank you all so very much for watching. As I said, Gatekey is still a work in progress story, nothing complete quite yet, but I hope to share this process with you guys further as I develop it down the line through more videos like these. But if you are still hungry for more content, I do have a Patreon where you can see full-on finished pieces for videos in the future, or even extra character bits and lore that I wouldn't typically post anywhere else. My $3 tier allows access to all artwork that I would usually post weeks later on places like DA or Tumblr, as well as work in progresses, video bloopers, snippets, and even the ability to participate in future events. My $5 tier is all that and access to my videos the moment that they are done. And at last, my $10 tier is for those who are interested in full-on script and story spoilers, as well as some nasty, naughty artwork I wouldn't typically post anywhere else. So if you would like to support these silly little guys, my Patreon is absolutely the place to do that. And one more place that you can also support me is my Etsy shop. If you want to get any physical merchandise from me, I do make stickers and I am looking to make posters. So take a look over there if you do want to see more of my work that you are able to hold and purchase. Once again, thank you very much for watching, and absolutely do have a wonderful day.
Hi kids, what's for dinner?